Welcome, and nice of you to join me here at Black Lodge Publishing on our YouTube channel. Black Lodge Publishing presents part 4 and final talk in our series of Typhonian Mysteries, in which I've been focusing on alchemical and Thoth tarotic themes. Before we embark, I would suggest that yet again, listeners should review the previous 3 talks in order to maintain some formal continuity throughout the entire series. For in tonight's talk, I want to draw several specific concepts together and further explore theories and practice by activating a parallel interpretation of alchemical and tarotic ideas. As I've pointed out, the activation of the 22 major arcana of the Thoth Tarot is not unlike the methodologies applied in the Opus Alchemicum. For indeed, the tarot can be used to glyph the process of initiation through that of a practical methodology and especially in that of activating the Ophidian current. Remember that the downward tending darkness or tenebrosum represents the neophyte's initial situation and indeed that of the alchemist's starting point. That is where one who enters the mons philosophorum must seek in the massa confusa, the materia prima, and then engage in that of cleansing, the negredo. Thus, and analogically, both alchemy and tarot have similar theoretical and indeed practical goals, for as we have noted, the goal of their operation can be achieved through way of a personalised transformation, and this ultimately can lead the more skilled practitioner by way of the current to that of illumination. That is the reason why Crowley's Book of Lies, see also my YouTube talk on the Night of Pan, begins on the first page with a question mark, and which is followed on the subsequent page by that of an exclamation mark. Otherwise, 2 cleverly worked glyphs from his little philosophical masterwork, The Soldier and The Hunchback, and which together represent a method whereby practitioners of all grades and study and practice, that is, by way of the hunchback, a question mark, enables them to discover that eureka moment as the upright soldier, as an exclamation of discovery, also prefigured in the Rosicrucian allegorical and initiatory chemical wedding. Thus, not unlike the rough and smooth ashlar blocks, the hunchback and the soldier signify practitioners' studies and indeed movement through the great game towards its completion. For example, the probationer and indeed those who aim at becoming adepts should be prepared for further theoretical and practical tests, and which indeed point to further examinations, initiations, and therefore contain further questions and more answers. The practical work can therefore take on several different forms, but yet again, this will be reflected by way of an individual's choice of route through the entire system, and which itself is also part of the great work. The methodologies and processes involved in one's studies can also be reflected through that of a somewhat spiralling journey upwards through the paths and gates on the tree of life, or through that associated with the alchemical practice, which leads to the entrance of the normally closed palace and chambers wherein the king and queen bathe, and which then lead to the hieros gamos, or sacred marriage, of the red and white powders. This is also represented through certain elements used in the Gnostic Mass. We now see that the practitioner on this occult path must engage in the magnum opus or great work, and wherein there are indeed several different methods and routes of attainment to engage in. However, I would hope that listeners will by now have realised that the downward path, that of catabasis, is originally glyphed by the lightning strike from Ein Sof Ur through Kether down to Malkuth. That is by way of linking the full and universe atu, and which glyphs the emanation from the original chaos of mind and soul into matter, through the abyss, and thence into cosmic corporeality and indeed time, chronos. And note, chronos, the central in the cube and rosy cross, is a symbol that we begin with. One should therefore also understand that the return journey, or anabasis, is that of an upward spiralling path, and where the practitioner must learn to activate their own Ophidian pathway by reunifying that from out of matter. For example, by way of meditative praxis, such as that involving the awakening of Kundalini from Muladhara, or by way of the alchemical materia prima through its stages of transformation, or as glyphed by way of aiming like an archer from Malkuth through Yesod, unifying in the golden globe of Tifereth, and thence an adept through the abyss, gaining the knowledge that is Dath, onto Bina, Chokhmah and Kether, the supernals. The system is then unified, complete, and ready for the cyclic return. By this reading, the full Atu can demonstrate the way of the mind and soul before its descent to katabasis, but it also implies that of another, more esoteric meaning. For we would do well to understand the entire process involved is indeed cyclic, hence the serpent bites its tail, 1 equals 10 and 10 equals 1, and this is already prefigured in the original Egyptian non-linear cyclicity of Nun, Atum and Apophis, that is, before Zep Tepi, or first time, or cosmic corporeality. This can also be reflected through certain energia in the dunamis of the supernals, Kether, Chokhmah and Bina. Others, however, see in these more creatively glyphed forms Ein, Ein Sof and Ein Sof Ur. Our task at this stage might appear to create a particular ontological argument, and from which certain theoretical differences now become apparent. However, for the practitioner, who prior to entering and ascending the occult mountain and seeking such as the final stage of gnosis, must not only understand but also reunify the entire system, and who, like Parsifal, must become like the perfect fool. For in some tarot decks, the fool goes by names such as the Seeker or Innocence, and for this reason, the fool can be applied to a point zero. And again, in some decks, the androgynous nature of the fool is represented either as a final card or simply has no number. The Thoth deck therefore correctly labels the fool as 0, and this in itself represents the cosmic dance or perichoresis that is about to begin, and therefore the occult meaning behind the cyclicity is represented by the Ouroboros or tail eater. As I have hinted, the student should really begin their own personal studies by following those initiatory pathways, by firstly being grounded or fixed in the earth of Malkuth, and where the universe Atu, as Saturn provides that of a central point that is rightly described by the first of the 22 paths that lead from Malkuth, or the centre of one's cube, finally to be destined for that of Kether and the light of extension. This can be demonstrated through the visualization of one fixed corporeal point at the centre of one's own meditative cube of light or space, which is glyphed, as we have found, by unfolding the rosy cross, whereon 3 mother letters, as well as representing directions up, down, in, out, forwards, backwards, along with the elements of air, water and fire, for remember that the central point is that of Hadit, Geb, the earth, represented by the tarot universe, and Saturn. Thus glyphs must be studied so that along with the linear directions that spring forth from the central point en route through the activation of the current, thence following the serpent's path to Yesod. For as I have hinted at in Lecture 3, that is by way of this route becoming a reality, one then recognises through sometimes painful discovery that the alchemical materia prima you seek and find is merely, for some, the start of a long and protracted work. This is glyphed by that of a large question mark, in which through praxis can be transformed into an exclamation mark when one discovers part of the entire journey's answer. Yet again, we find this symbolised by an unworked ashlar block, or indeed that of the materia prima itself, when found hidden deep within the mons philosophical. It is that state of negredo wherein the massa confusa lies, in which there awaits an object to be cleansed. Tarotic initiation is therefore begun by way of the universe Atu, and where one's katabasis is then reflected backwards by way of one's anabasis, or upward return, or even in saying that, through that of an inward bilocation of mind and soul from that of the body. For as the Tabula Smaragdina or Emerald Tablet famously notes, as above so below as above, for the perfection of the One, and thus we find this recognised in the oneness of being. Therefore, take the full Atu and place it to the right of the universe Atu. For now the full is zero, glyphed as coming either at the beginning or at the end of one's work. For indeed, it is through that of reunification of the beginning with the end that is prefigured from the zero to the one, and thus in a way represents all knowledge. For not unlike Nietzsche's madman, it also leads to madness. Yet, one should take heart, for it is the fool who sometimes utters the only truth. I have not said too much concerning methodology of working directly with the cards. However, I hope to have left enough clues throughout these talks that narrate much between the two subjects and their praxis. One such method used to explore the relation between Malkuth and Yesod, and as I have noted in a previous talk, is based on the visualization of the cube of light, but which is also one of the first and most difficult of initiatory steps. Thus, and by way of a more specialised praxis, the student can learn to creatively manipulate the realm of perception and corporeality by invoking and activating a state of disorientation. However, I should warn the listener that this procedure is not without its difficulties, but will nonetheless aid the practitioner in reaching that of Yesod's gate. This is by way of the 21st Atu, the universe. To begin, I usually ask students to concentrate on the trains and 1, be able to reverse their directions, then 2, be able to slow them down, and 3, if possible, to stop them completely. After this short exercise based on proprioception and a creative visualization exercise on optical illusions, now close your eyes and begin to centre yourself as a fixed point, as at the centre of the rosy cross, and then gently visualise a moving triangular shape, then a singular tetrahedron, spinning clockwise above your head, and then another spinning anti-clockwise below your feet. Let the two faces come together and enclose your central point. If you like, try forming a pyramid that moves inwards and outwards, and by rotation in the mind's eye, you can distort any point of their vertices. For the solitary practitioner, you can of course vary any of these exercises. However, if you begin your studies based on manipulation of the rosy cross and the symbolism of the cube, block, vertices, tetrahedrons, and then if you can manage to expand the schema by moving beyond those of our three-dimensional linear structures, the elements, planets and signs of the zodiac, and from where one can begin to bilocate one's thoughts and learn how to coalesce all cosmic corporeality. This is why we seek to disorientate the senses by concentration and creative manipulation. This reflects our ability to blend various seeming contradictions, and then one can, as such, as a consummate alchemist, magician or tarotic practitioner, learn to discover, then conjoin those more occult meanings behind the tarot, initiation, and, for example, the pentagram and hexagram. Compare the job of the Hierophant. And the realities behind the red and white powders. This latter is of course represented through the summation by draining and mixing every essence of those contraries into the chalice, and then by imbibing the contents, one can begin to understand what lies behind corporeal duality and indeed the function of its purpose for the initiate's further journey and union. If you've followed all my talks thus far, you are now sufficiently briefed and ready to engage in the central point of tonight's talk, and that is of the alchemist and tarotic practitioner's use of magic through that which we call either the art of fire and or art of the will. For both rely on the activation through the mind, ak, nous as the philosophical mercury, the soul, ba, psyche as philosophical sulphur, within the corporeality of the body, chat, soma as philosophical salt. We can now see that this process is cleverly glyphed on several cards in the Thoth deck, but is also central to the alchemical tria prima, and thus alchemical process as a whole. However, and as I have hinted, the work can only truly be invoked through that of creative esotericism and activating the Ophidian current, wherein what we term art can not only be referred specifically to the accomplishment of our alchemical confection, but also to that of its philosophical and magical use. Thus, when one creatively combines the art atu with the lover's atu, that is by conjoining their meanings into one, that is when the iconography, glyphs and meaning of both cards are combined into that of a vacated space or hypodochi between them, one can then creatively project that of a new singular meaning glyphed from the two original cards. This can in fact be done using several related cards, although I would suggest that the practitioner should begin with two. Both atu are, for example, already glyphs in themselves, but when combined then one learns that what appears originally as somewhat contradictory and even reversed elements on each individual card can now be created into an answer, and wherefrom the iconography and glyphs themselves can be creatively blended. Thus the result will be to produce that of a singular, higher level vibration through their union. Among those cosmic contraries, it is the tetrastoichia, or four elements, that we discover that fire and water are amongst the most extreme of pairings, and so it is to their unification through conjunctio that represents one of the highest processes in both alchemy and in the tarotic arts. Of course, we can also represent them by male and female, king and queen, blood and semen and red and white powders, etc., used to perfect iosis. The combination of the two is also connected to the full atu, but this time it is activated via the winged serpents of the caducees as it spirals into the centre of the iconography of the full. We see in the mixture of iconography and glyphs a further hint at the higher and lower aspects of either the downward tending or indeed upward tending Ophidian current in motion. This mixture of fire and water is yet, however, not only for mere appearance, but also hints at the internal processes engaged within by the initiate. For indeed the iconography on the art atu glyphs the completion of the hieros gamos, that is, in that initially represented by the lover's card. But when combined on a higher level, they form that of a bisexual character. Yet as we see on later atu, they originate from the Greek goddess Artemis, the divine virgin archer, who on the art card is represented as an alchemical rebus, in Latin literally res bis, or two thing. Even the bees and snakes on her dress are united. The lion and the eagle are in size much bigger and have esoterically reversed their colours. I suggest you pause the talk and look again at the previous slide where you unified art and the lovers. I also suggest that that based on your own stage of transformation, one can see such changes occur even in our own anabasis. That is not without question an exclamation mark development. Everything deep within our nightside subconscious, along with the thoughts that surround the self, have to be engaged, understood, transformed, cleansed, and finally born anew as a phoenix resurrected from the ashes. At the centre of the operation is an arrow shooting upwards, and this hints at the direction the initiate should willingly fire. Our mistress's outfit is green. This greening is an essential colour, out of which we obtain the red and white, wherein transformation is referenced in both ancient praxis and alchemical literature. From the greening of the dress, genesis in life begins, and it appears either as a product out of or from itself as part of the creative matrix and dunamis. It goes on to usher an iconic rainbow with a version of the famous alchemical vitriol, Visita interiora terrae rectificando in veniis occultum lapidem, or visit the interior of the earth, and through which, refining, you will find the hidden stone. Some alchemists utilise the word chemia, which they base on the word chemt, the black skin of a crocodile, and from which they see a reflection of the materia prima, the blackness, analogically considered as the Nile's black productive silt, which is watered by the starry Nile, bringing new life every year. I want to finish this talk with an area of study that fits well with the origin of our discussion on alchemy, and indeed that of our tarot. For in the Book of Coming Forth by Day, or Egyptian Book of the Dead, we read, "Illumine the Osiris," where the name of the deceased is inserted, whose word is Mahat, that is order and truth. Hail Shabti figure, that is a fetish, if the Osiris name be decreed to do any work which is to be done in the Kert Neter, the divine place in the Duat, or Aaru, the field of reeds, Let everything which stands in the way be removed from him, whether it be to plough the fields, or to fill the channels with water, or to carry sand from the east to the west. The Shabti figure then replies, I will do it. Verily, I am here whenever you call. The point of this invocation and resurrection is also confirmed in the black fertile silt and greening associated with the Nile and seen in the Koyak festival, which means sustenance upon sustenance from the Egyptian Kaherka, and where from out of the black Osiris beds sprang the green shoots from the water and silt which go to make the form of a mummified shaped figure. Literally, from the tith and water seeds appear out of a cartonnage designed with the fiery head of the solar falcon-headed Neter Sochar. I therefore leave it for the listener to create from this slide their own alchemical and tarotic meaning. I hope that this brief but thought-provoking series of talks on alchemy and the Thoth Tarot will promote further esoteric research by the inquiring listener. Many thanks for joining us at Black Lodge Publishing, and hope you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Many thanks to John and Elaine for all their work in recording and promoting this project. Until next time, Nox Pan.